my first tour of Afghanistan, probably my second tour of Afghanistan, it was just go out there, do a job, come back, and you had a what they used to call post-operational tour leave. You would go through Cyprus, everyone would have beers, and then that'd be it.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
What's going on? So I want to give this little preface before this conversation with Mr. Darker by saying that there was a little bit of, connection issues, and there was a couple times where I had lost him, so we had to reconnect and restart the conversation, but I did my very best to kind of make it seamless and edit it all together to make it a lot more fluid and easier to digest for you guys. So just keep that in mind while listening, and thank you so much. But let's go on with today's show. Hey, what's up? Welcome to another episode of Hey Mark podcast, where I get to have open and authentic conversations about mental health, self-development, and the conversations that just don't get to come up on a daily basis. And I am joined here today with Mr. Darker. I got to say first, thank you so much for your time, because there is a bit of a time difference, so we did have to line this up. But I got to say, you have the coolest last name I've ever heard of. Chris Darker is like the most intimidating name ever, man. Before we jump into it and you kind of talk about the qualifications that you have to talk about these topics, why don't you just kind of give everybody like a little introduction about who you are, what you're all about, and I guess, your history, and then what you're up to now.
Okay, so nice introduction. I'm Chris Darker. I'm currently serving with the UK Armed Forces. I've been with the Armed Forces for 16 years now. And I'm currently teaching as an instructor at the Royal School of Artillery, which is one of the sort of phase 3 establishments. So I'm last stage before people go out and deploy to wherever they're deploying to all over the world. I am currently a Warrant Officer Class 2, which is a Sergeant Major. I know the Canadian Forces have a similar sort of setup to us. I know they have warrant officers there as well. I've served with the Canadian Forces as well. I was done an attachment in Kingston, where I was working at the Peace Support Training Centre there, doing a very similar job to what I'm doing now, which is deploying people out on tour in various different roles. Pretty much my sort of military history. The current sort of, in fact, not current, probably, if you're happy, we sort of jump back a little bit. I'll tell you my sort of, my piece about the mental health and sort of dealing with trauma that I've done whilst I've been in.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cool. So effectively, when I first joined, there wasn't really anything in the forces to deal with, traumatic events, with PTSD, with anything at all. It was, we're not talking that long ago. We're only talking sort of 2005, 2006, sort of my first period out in Afghanistan. I've done 3 tours of Afghanistan, a tour of Iraq, and sort of some other deployments as well. But they were the sort of big 4 that I've done. My first tour of Afghanistan, probably my second tour of Afghanistan, it was just go out there, do a job, come back, and you had what they used to call POTL, so post-operational tour leave. You would go through Cyprus, everyone would have beers, and then that'd be it. That was you done. And in fact, probably when we used to get back into camp, you'd be gated for a couple of days just to make sure you didn't go straight down the nightclubs as soon as you're back from sort of Afghanistan. So a couple of days in, the padre, sort of the priest, and a couple of people come and talk to you and go, don't do anything crazy. You're not allowed to drink drive. You're not allowed to do this. You're back in the UK now. That's it. And that was it. That was the only sort of thing that happened at all. Whereas now, and as the process went on, probably 2008, 2009, they brought in something called the TRIM courses. So TRIM courses were called basically traumatic incident management. So if somebody went through some sort of traumatic event, there were people who were trained to signpost them effectively to different places so they could, give people advice that we just didn't have before. My first couple of tours were pretty ropey, in so much as, firefights and explosions and dealing with, death and trauma, fighting enemy, but also, dealing with injuries, and fatalities of your own friends as well. But nothing really got done about it. So just having that trim practitioner there who could just, speak to you and tell you where you could go, what you could do, worked for some people. I'm of the opinion that some people really need that and other people don't need that, and there could be thousands of different reasons for why they need it and why they don't. But that was the first step of giving people that really needed managing effectively. And then we've moved on loads and loads since that. And the UK forces now have a whole MRT package, which is mental resilience training package, which is getting better and better every year. It started as a yearly brief, which has quickly become a huge training package to make sure that people are, first off, more mentally resilient, but also it gives people the understanding of why things affect them in different ways. And I think that understanding the root cause of why things affect you is more helpful than the signposting once something has already happened, because it allows you to sort of rationalize things a little bit. And yeah, that's pretty much the journey of trauma or traumatic incident management and mental resilience training over. Well, in fact, that's it. That's the two pieces that have happened. We went from zero, trim, mental resilience training, and that's sort of where we're at. And that was a 16-year period, and that's how it went.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that, because obviously these militaries have existed for years and years and years. And in the last decade and a half, they're like, fuck, we got to start dealing with this.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
I mean, it's a lot better now. Even 3 or 4 years ago, it still wasn't great. And I've got friends and really close friends actually, who have been through traumatic events, who have been told by people in positions of power, like, positions that I find myself in the lucky place to be in now. I'm a sergeant major in the army. I've got people that work for me, and my friends have been, into the equivalent of me, saying, I've got an issue. I've not dealt, this happened on tour. Or, I'm going through this, and they've been told, fuck off and man up. Do you know what I mean? Which, it's weird. You go in with a broken arm and they're like, oh yeah, you need to go and take some time off. You go in with something that people can't see, and it's something like they don't believe it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not like these are new problems at all, right? Like, especially, like, I'm pretty sure, like, coming and then, like, in the UK after World War I, when soldiers were coming back with what they used to call shell shock, like, wasn't there like huge, like, they were like almost oppressed, like they were like pushed back, like I think they were like put in jail or even worse, like.
They could be sectioned. I don't know if Canada has a similar thing, but you could be sectioned 28 days in a mental hospital, and that was it. That would tide them over until the next time they had sort of an incident or repressed back to some of the traumatic events. I'm only talking from the last 15, 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the events that must have happened in, big World War II, World War One, I'm sure Korea and places like that, they must have been horrendous. I couldn't imagine anything that bad. And yet they come back and they just had to assimilate straight back into society. Yeah, and as well, with national service, it was like you wasn't a career soldier who done 10 years, 12 years, 22 years, whatever. You went away, you'd done your 5 years. That was you back home. Zero
Yeah,
more.
and we're talking like conscription of young men at the time as well.
Yeah, it wasn't until my granddad joined. When he was super young, just because his other two old brothers joined. So he lied to join during World War II, so that he could go out there because he didn't want to be the one that was left behind. So you had, and there's loads of cases about 14, 15-year-old boys going out and fighting in the trenches.
Yeah, I was going to say that as well. It's a different type of warfare as well, like where they're like literally digging trenches for each other to go through and not get run over by tanks. I literally have zero military experience. I'm a carpenter, man. So like I don't know much about it, but I'm going to say like definitely war has evolved, right? Like it's completely different warfare.
Yeah, yeah, completely. But I suppose with that as well, weaponry has evolved to be even more fatal. And it's way easier to kill people now, and from further away or by more violent means, more precise. Long distance weapons have evolved, so it's quite weird how it has evolved. And even just during my time, I saw Afghanistan evolve over the course of. I mean, my first tour was in 2006. My last tour was 2014. So even that 8 year period, it completely changed the way that, first off, the way we done business. Secondly, the way that people dealt with that business that was being done as well.
Yeah, I was talking to an American veteran. He's a young guy. He's 27 years old, so he's just a year older than me as well. But he was telling me about, while he was in Afghanistan, they've got these blimps that they surveillance the area with. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, you can see the pores on people's face from
Yeah,
miles away. And obviously, like he's exaggerating a little bit, but it's like, man, that kind of stuff, that's crazy to think.
yeah. We had something similar. Again, it shows the absolute change. We had we'd put a mast up and put a camera on it on my first tour, whereas by the last tours we're sending small UAVs out, 10, 15K away, that can pick up people in vehicles, and people as they're coming out of buildings and identify them. It's crazy. I know the blimps you're talking.
I think I lost you there, brother.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
All good, all good. Sorry, you cut off when you were saying that the blimps I'm talking about.
Oh yes, so the blimps you're talking about, I think they were called PGSS, so persistent ground surveillance systems. Um, and yeah, they one of my tasks in Iraq was to go and search for one that had broken its chainings, and sort of sailed away in the wind.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Back on kind of like more of the topic of like mental health, and you were kind of talking about this. You've already alluded to it as well. Kind of I was going to ask like and I don't know really how to phrase this question, but I guess like, because, I've played on different sports teams growing up. Like I grew up playing rugby, and like every other Canadian, I grew up playing hockey as well. And so like, we definitely, like when you're on a sports team, you form a brotherhood, right?
Mm.
But like 99% of those conversations or relationships are very like surface level. There's very few times where you're like kind of sitting there talking about like, how are you? And having an answer that's honest instead of like just I'm good today, bro. How are you? Like obviously, like being in the military, you form a pretty tight brotherhood as well. But does that stigma kind of end, or like do you have kind of a deeper connection that way?
Um, no, you know what? It's probably the same, and it's probably one of, looking back, and even you just asked me the question. I just had to think, when was the last time I just sat down and went, you're all right, because it just, that sort of stuff just doesn't come up.
Yeah.
It's, everyone, it's pretty macho. Everyone wants to know how many people they've matched on Tinder, or it's real macho talk. But actually, someone would probably really appreciate just someone asking how they are. I recently sat down. My brothers have served in the military as well. One of my brothers lives just down the road from me, where I live in the UK, and a load of his old, ex-army buddies come round just for a few drinks a little while ago, and it was nice just to sit there. Take the mick out of some of the stuff people used to get up to. They're all veterans now; they're all out, but it slipped straight back into being in the military sort of 10 years ago.
It's like you get never left kind of thing.
Yeah, for them, I mean,
For
I'm
them,
still
yeah.
in, but yeah, for them, it probably felt exactly the same, and now they're doing all sorts of stuff and living in different countries, and but it's kind of weird because soldiers are almost childlike. It's real childish. We find stupid things funny, and even like real dangerous stuff out in Afghanistan, Iraq. But I've been in firefights where people are laughing their heads off because I mean, it must be the nerves. I think that nerves just get to people, and they're fits of the giggles and stuff like that. It's just I don't know. It's really weird. It's a weird group of people to be dealing with.
Yeah. And you talk about like the, maybe I'm like kind of not understanding 100%, like with the trim and the other like kind of support that you guys have, like in terms of mental health, like you're kind of, it sounds like a lot of it's like kind of like post tour, like you come back and it's kind of like, hey, like, did you go through anything like this? And then if you're honest about it, or they can tell something's up, then you like kind of go through that. But are you prepped beforehand, like kind of going out, like,
So the way they do it now with
is that what the resilience training is?
yeah. So the MRT package, the mental resilience training package, that now I feel, and it's personal opinion, I guess. That some people don't like it. They think it's a hindrance because a lot of people, again, macho as hell, and they don't think they can be affected. But I think it's good. It's a good thing. Let me know how things can affect me. Let me know that that there are avenues I can go if I decide I need some help. I'd rather know where I can go, to get that help prior to me being in a situation where I actually need it.
Yeah, and I feel like there's this fine line, and maybe you have a better opinion or perspective on this, but I feel like there's like a fine line. Like there definitely, because people are like, well, these people have to kind of be quote unquote like maybe softened up a little bit or prepared for this kind of stuff. But then it's also like you kind of want your military to be, somewhat hard because when you're going out to war, and again, this is something that this is the trigger warning if there is one that needs to be said, but like, and this much better than I do, but we're talking like child soldiers in war, and there's a lot of things you have to deal with that a regular civilian like myself, like we would never imagine would be like something that we'd have to mentally deal with. And it's like, well, you kind of want your soldiers to kind of be able to deal with those things and act without hesitation to keep their comrades safe. But it's also like once you come back and assimilate, there's this weird like disconnect of like we need them to be hard when they're there, but then when they come back we need them to assimilate properly, and it's like kind of a weird double standard.
Yes, it's odd. I think people forget that the main job of a soldier is to close with and kill your enemies.
Exactly.
That's the bottom line. Whether you do that as part of your role in the military or not, that's the bottom line of what it is. But yeah, you're right. It's hard. And that's not just out in theatre as well. You've got to go to work. You've got to deal. You've got to be pretty macho to deal with 60 other guys that work for you, and then come home and be told what to do by your wife and your 7-year-old son. It's so you go through a daily process of having to switch it on and switch it off. Yeah, and I guess if you've got a good support network, good wife, good family, husband, whatever, that probably makes it easier for you to switch that on and switch it off. But yeah, you're right. It can be difficult. It can sometimes take a little while just to get back in the swing of things. Once you go away for 6 months out to a theatre to then come back, it can be difficult. And even I've struggled with that, but I'm in a lucky position that my wife will keep me in check.
Yeah, it's like, man, I could only imagine, because like I know even sometimes like I said, like I work in construction, and there's a completely different way than when you talk at work than when you talk with your
Yeah,
family or your
of
girlfriend,
course.
etc. Right? And it's like sometimes I forget to turn it off. I come home and I'm swearing a lot more, or I'm saying things I wouldn't normally say. And it's like, man, I could only imagine if you're immersed in it for months on end and then you have to come back. And it's
Yeah.
like much, much more difficult. Do you think that there's like something that's, I guess, measurable or somehow to tell? Because like there's definitely, like you said, like I've seen people that, are veterans here in Canada and they handle it, like you said, seemingly a lot better. And then there's some people that come back just broken. And like, is there a different, like, is there a way to tell, or do you think that there's some measurable way to predict that?
Do you know what? I think every single person gets affected in some way. I think that the measurement or the yardstick is so hard to gauge. I've got people from exactly the same sort of area I'm from, with a similar upbringing to what I had, with a similar family situation, who have been affected way differently from the same event as what I have. So I don't know. I don't know if it's potentially people's ability to compartmentalize trauma, which there's a lot of evidence suggests that being able to do that, it will be a benefit to people in my sort of fields. But in any field where you're dealing with any sort of risk of trauma, whether that be ambulance drivers, nurses, anyone, I don't think you can ever measure it, because it's so personal, and the way that it affects you is so different, even the exact same event.
Yeah, like I mean, like personally, I've had conversations as well with like first responders here in Canada as well, where they explain some of the things that they've been called for, and it's gruesome. And I couldn't imagine mentally having to deal with that, because like you see some traumatic things happen to young babies, and then you have a baby of your own, and then you're maybe scared of something happening to them. I'm like, I used to volunteer like downtown Vancouver, and I remember there was this one conversation where one time I'm handing out like sandwiches and stuff to homeless people, and they're crossing the street all kind of like frantically and not safely at all. And there's these cops that come by and they're telling me basically to fuck off, right? And I'm like, come on,
Yeah,
man, have a heart. Like, I'm handing out food. And this cop looks at me dead in the eye and he says, you ever pulled a body out from a transit bus before? And that's all he had to say. And I was like, holy shit, man. Like, this guy's fucking seen and had to do shit that I couldn't even imagine.
yeah, yeah. You hear stories. I consider myself fairly lucky, in so much as I don't think I've ever been severely affected by anything I've seen or done. But I know for a fact that people have seen the exact same things that I've seen, and they're now still struggling to this day as veterans, with those events. But it's weird, because you mentioned a real good point there about potentially seeing a dead baby and then having your own baby. But there was an incident that happened where an IED went off, and people were bagging up body parts, and there was some young civilians got injured in it, and we were trying to sort of help them out. A couple of little girls got fairly injured in that, and speaking to someone really close to me, that affected him so severely, because the kid was the same age as his daughter, and I think that he probably now really struggle. Well, he really struggles with that link that he didn't even mean to happen. His brain just made the link, and now it's in there, and that link can never probably be broken. And it's just more a case of how does he now deal with it.
Yeah, because it's like it's a completely different like environment back in the UK than it is obviously in a war
Yeah,
zone, right? And it's like it's probably not going to ever happen. Obviously we pray, but it's like, yeah, once you see that or you make that connection mentally, it's like, accidents happen here as well. right? Like, I mean, the paramedic that
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
speaking to, I listened to a podcast where she got interviewed on, and again, it's not really my story to tell, but walking in and seeing a baby like kind of drown in a bathtub, it's like these things happen here as well.
yeah. You're right, and there's a lot of different professions. Yeah, even your profession. I've seen someone fall off a scaffolding. And die, or have an accident with a set of tools, or there's also in a factory you can fall in a mincing machine. There's so many different things that can happen, and so many different avenues for a traumatic event to happen. But yeah, it's that it's that your brain deals with it, I think, in a certain way, and until one happens, you don't know how your brain's gonna compartmentalize it.
Yeah, and have you heard stories like again, like I don't really know your perspective on this, but have you heard stories of like people that maybe have dealt with these things? They're, coming back, they're experiencing trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, and you can tell like something's been snapped, like something's been broken. And I guess you did allude to this earlier, but like, do you think that there's a way to flip that switch back for those types of those I guess disorders like post-traumatic stress disorder?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of it's education. Education of how to deal with it, which never used to happen but does now. A very good friend of mine is really really open about his battle with PTSD that didn't start until he left the forces. He had a 22-year career in the forces, um, and then I think that it sort of staved off the issues that were always going to happen, being around all the rest of the soldiers. And then the last part is just the zero help he got when he left, and then was just expected to deal with it. He was lucky enough. Yeah, and he's open about this as well, so he won't mind me telling this story for other people. He got to a stage where he went for a walk that he didn't plan on coming back from, um, and luckily received a phone call and got the help that he needed. He was lucky enough to get a residential spot, with a charity that effectively used different workshops and different methods to coach him through how to deal with that type of stress. So yeah, education's big, but there's only a certain amount of spaces on those type of courses, those residential courses. Unfortunately, there's not enough for everybody.
Yeah, it's crazy to think as well because like there's so many parallelisms between I guess the struggles mentally between somebody that's in the military and someone who's just a regular civilian as well.
Mm.
And I know for myself, like especially speaking to some of the people that I've spoken to recently, I'm like, man, I grew up with depression and anxiety, and hearing some of these stories, I'm like, man, I feel like I have no reason to feel this way. You know what I mean? And you hear about all these other stories, but
Yeah,
there's so much parallelism in the sense of like kind of the solution, even though that there's not parallelism in like maybe the cause or the problem. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah. The route, the route is, there's struggles along the route, and how you deal with them, whether it be people getting depressed because of events, or people getting anxious because of the way that they perceive something should be dealt with, but they don't deal with it like that. It can hit you a multitude of different ways, and actually, it doesn't matter what the event is. It doesn't matter who you are. People are going to go through, regardless, all these different doorways that are going to be a challenge to open, and whether that challenge is depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, even there's so many different things that are going to be challenging for people. It's just the sort of PTSD tends to be the one that I sort of deal with a lot, but it tends to also be linked heavily with unfortunately depression, anxiety, drink abuse. Tends to be pretty high on there as well.
Yeah, substance abuse seems to be a pretty like common coping mechanism for a lot of these things. And there's always like, I don't know if you ever hear about like kind of like this sort of debate, and it's not really even a debate, but I always think of like kind of depression and anxiety as symptoms of other things, not like the actual cause of things.
Mm.
But I feel like that you kind of nailed on the head as well. Like kind of when you have PTSD, then that leads to depression and anxiety because, like I said, it can be kind of like symptomatic of other things as well. I know like personally in my own life, especially with anxiety, like I kind of have been working a lot on it, like in regards to discipline, because I never really grew up as a disciplined kid. I was kind of like, you know, a small example, like when I was on sports teams, if the coach looked away, then I kind of fuck off and stop working hard. I was the type to just only work hard when I was being watched, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
do you think that like, because especially in the military, it's such a common theme, like us as civilians, we see the military as, you know, militant, as disciplined. Do you think that that discipline factor in the military kind of helps with dealing with these things, or do you think that it's kind of it's kind of indifferent?
Um, I think that when I first joined, the military was more disciplined than what it is now. But we've also got a completely different type of person joining now than what we had back then. Um, you know, my circumstances, you know, the way, if you're happy for me to talk about sort of how I grew up a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. Whatever you're down to talk about, man.
So I'm from a sort of a real big family. I'm the oldest of 11 kids. And you know, we grew up poor as hell, you know, on a big council estate. You know, my dad in and out of prison all the time. My mum sort of holding things down. And you know, when he did get out, he offered nothing of value to the family at all, apart from you know, potentially bring a bit of money in, or well, pretty much just toughen us up a little bit, you know, in various different ways, whether that be, looking back on it now, probably a bit, you know, abusive and you know, a family full of violence, you know. I didn't do well at school. It was never, and none of my siblings done well at school, because it was just never, um, there was never any onus on doing well at school. I was lucky enough to find um, a an outlet for, you know, potentially a bad path that I was going down, and that was the cadets at the time. So I joined the cadets, and used to go on a Tuesday and Thursday, and I'd go over to the cadets and do some bits there, which kept me sort of on the straight and narrow a little bit. The guy that run it, I didn't realise at the time, but as I've got older and learnt lessons, there's a you know, probably one of the best people I ever met during growing up, definitely as a teenager, was a guy called Dave Moth, and he was the head of the Sea Cadet unit that I went to. Unfortunately, he passed away a little while ago, but I stay in touch with a lot of people there, and he set people on a path of wanting better than where we grew up. And a lot of them joined the military, whether that be the Navy, the Marines, the Army. And the ones that did all tended to sort of get themselves out. And the way, I'm sort of going off tangent a little bit, but the way that sort of plays in now is a lot of people have already got issues already by the time, especially back in, you know, the early 2000s. They already had trauma, and they already dealt with probably depression, although they didn't know what it was. Already dealt with anxiety, worrying about, you know, when they're, you know, abusive parents going to come home, or, you know, trying to look after your siblings when really you shouldn't be at 10, 11, 12 years old looking after them. Having, you know, drug or alcohol abuse in the home. You're already dealing with trauma. You just don't know it. And sometimes, and I know this is true, that incident that happens 5 years later out in Afghanistan is just the sort of final thing on the horse's back that just tips you over the edge, and I think that happens a lot more often than people think, and we just look at it as a singular event when it's not. It's years worth of stuff that's happened. I like to, you know, I like to liken it to a bottle. there's only so much stress that your bottle can hold, and it's really important to make sure you tip some of that stress out every now and again, in whatever sort of constructive way you like, whether that be blowing off some steam, whether it be going on holiday, whether it be a trip away with your wife, whether whatever. Creating a bit of a gap in that bottle is really, really important, because that bottle will burst if you let it fill up too high.
Yeah, and I feel like, and I know like I can kind of only speak to my experience, but I feel like there's so many times like in school, you're taught basic mathematics, you're taught X, Y, and Z in public school where I grew up. But it's like we never really went over coping mechanisms. We never really went over stress management. We barely ever went over like financial management or anything really that we really like would be applicable to like real life. And that's kind of something that's put onto the parents. And obviously that is something that, I think maybe is a good thing to be learned in the home. But there's so many times where, especially like generations before ours, where it's like, our parents didn't. If you were to ask my grandfather, like my grandpa's from Denmark, my mom's from the UK as well. But if you were to ask either of them, like, what's depression? They're like a time in the 20s, that's pretty much it, right? Like there's no real, like, they didn't even use that word before.
No, it's crazy how times have changed. I suppose the only depression that ever got talked about when I was a kid was postnatal depression, because that was the only one that existed, because my mum thought it was possible that women can get depression after they have a baby for a little bit. Weird. So my mum left me at the hospital. I didn't learn this until I was an adult, and she said, this is back in the day when you had to stay in hospital for like 10 days as a new mum. And my mum went home, and my nan had to go pick me up from the hospital as like a 10-day-old baby. But that's the only depression that ever got spoken about, and it was time barred. People back then were like, yeah, you might have postnatal depression, but you've got a couple of weeks, and then that's it, done. Well, in fact, you're right. They didn't even call it postnatal depression. They called it baby blues.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, they didn't even use that word before.
Yeah. The baby blues, they used to call it.
Yeah, I think back to like, especially because my grandpa, he grew up, obviously he spoke Danish and German. So I think that even if you were to ask that question to him, did you ever deal with depression? He'd be like, what do you mean? The Nazis invaded our country. What the fuck are you talking about? That's pretty much it.
Yeah. It's all like that. What could I be depressed about? I've got a house. I've got two arms. I can't be depressed. It's impossible.
Yeah, like it's like we're free. That's it.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think. And do you think that, again, this is like kind of a question that it almost seems like a no-brainer, but do you think that men, because there's kind of like that stigma around like men's mental health, like do you think that the women that serve in the military deal with the trauma differently, or do you think that between the men and women you see difference between that?
I don't. So I spent some time when I was a staff sergeant. I had my own troop back then. About 30, coming on 40 guys, ladies and men that I sort of managed. During that time, I had 3 women working for me, and there was no real relation number wise. I didn't have a huge exposure to female soldiers, but one of them that I did have exposure to suffered with mental health. But 2 other people that I looked after, men, suffered from mental health. I had a soldier who worked for me. Unfortunately, he took his own life at a Christmas party, a few years ago, at the same sort of time as this, with absolutely zero warning, zero. There was nothing. He just wasn't there. 1 minute, and people wondered where he was, and unfortunately, he'd gone back to his accommodation and taken his own life. The young lady that worked for me, all the signs were there that she was suffering. Lovely young girl, just the military was the wrong place. Was the wrong place for her. She was dealing with issues prior to even joining, and that all got compounded and exacerbated with the stress of service. Luckily she managed to get the help she needed, and is no longer in the forces, but hopefully she's doing well now.
Now, is there like kind of like a pre-screening before you join the military services there?
No, no, nothing at all. Not for mental health anyway.
I think I'm losing you again. Oh, I thought I lost you. I do have you still.
Yeah, I'm still here.
No worries, no worries. But yeah, you were saying there's no screening for mental health at all?
Nothing. Unless it's changed in the last couple of weeks, there's nothing at all. It's actually a pretty stressful process to go through for young people just to get in. But yeah, I think there should be mental screening exactly the same as the physical screening, because we're losing more people, or lose as much through mental health as we are through physical health. In a sort of bog standard regimen.
Do you think that like, because that's again, that almost is like a fine line in and of itself, because that almost, I mean, here in North America, I don't know how it is over there, like politically right now, but like there's like a lot of people that are kind of thinking that their rights are under threat and etc. Do you think that that would almost if you were to say, if you deal with X, Y, and Z, you can't join the military or you can't be in this part of the military? Do you think that people would start screaming like this is kind of like medical discrimination and maybe we have to just prep them a little bit more, but they could still do the job? Like, what's your kind of, again, there's no right or wrong answer for something like that, but do you think that that would be the right thing to do? Or do you think you could prep someone, I guess, like better? Like if you know that they're dealing with something, like, do you think there's a possibility to prep them better?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know. I don't know if there could be a way to prep them better. Um, I mean, you're right about the medical discrimination. If someone has been through something, I mean, where does it end? Do we say that a kid that's dropped out of school and been in and out of foster care or through the child protection system, do we exclude them from what's the limit of it? Because you could be losing some fantastic guys joining the service who deserve a break and deserve the chance of a decent career after not having a good chance in life. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard, and I don't know what the goalposts would be for it. But I think I don't know. I honestly don't know what that screening would look like. I'm hoping that there's people smarter than me that will be able to work that out to help us in the future.
I like that answer, man. I like it when people are always like, yeah, I don't know. I
Yeah,
like it, man.
yeah,
Everyone seems to know everything nowadays. You're like,
yeah.
man, I don't know. Do you that like and this whole conversation, like almost like it kind of, and I guess it's kind of my fault because I've been asking these kind of questions, but like it does seem kind of doom and gloom, but it sounds like even yourself, like this is an opportunity for people that maybe have come from a troubled past to kind of give them a value or a purpose in the universe. Like it's kind of like, hey, I can actually add value to the universe. Like I can start to, obviously, no
Yeah.
matter where you stand, like again, politically, because there's so much stigma around this type of conversation in the first place. It's like you're defending your country, like you're, creating the space where a lot of people in North America here, I'm sure it's kind of similar in the UK, they want to complain about, how bad we have it and how our governments are oppressive. And I mean, in certain ways, they definitely are. But it's like we're very privileged here. And the only reason that we have that privilege and the freedom that we have to even have conversations like this is because there's men like you who have defended that right. Like it's like I feel like it's such an opportunity to, if you come from kind of a troubled past, to add value to yourself, to feel like you have a purpose.
Yeah, totally agree. I going back, I joined the military first when I was 16. Because I had nothing else. I dropped out. I left school when I was 15. I bounced around doing some sort of cash in hand jobs until I was old enough to get out of the house. And I was literally, I turned 16 in the August, and in the September I was away, on selection. Um, but that didn't work out for me very well. I was there trying to get through. I was getting injured, and I didn't deal with it very well because I wasn't mature enough to deal with the injuries I took. I ended up being discharged out, and then I spent 18 months out. Living with my nan, bouncing around, drinking, and basically adding zero value to anything that I did, bouncing between jobs, bouncing between social circles, and I was just a mess. A couple of people that helped me during that time. I've got my best friend is my cousin as well, and he tried everything he could to try and get me out of the rut that he could see that I was getting into. And it got really bad, until I sort of just my nan unfortunately passed away. When I was living with her, and that sort of got me in check a little bit, and I then moved down south with another family member. I went into the army recruiting office. And by this stage, I'm 21 years old, and a few weeks later, I was at selection joining the army. And I've never looked back, because first off, it got me back on the straight and narrow. Secondly, I was good at it, and it was the first time. It's really the first time I'd ever been, appreciated for being good at something, and I'm in a lucky position now that I flew up and got promoted fast, and people really appreciated what I could bring to the table, and it felt good. It felt really good to have people on a yearly report say, this guy's disciplined, this guy, he's got good morals, he's got integrity, he does this, he does that, and it was so nice hearing it. I almost, I thrived on it, and then I wanted to do better again, and it was almost like I was, I wanted to please everyone, because once you hear something good, I work on praise. I like getting praise off people, and the military just ended up working out perfectly for me. There's been hardships, obviously, and I've dealt with a family life while I've been going through the military as well, and I was lucky enough to meet my wife Sam, who has been really good supporting me the whole time. But yeah, the whole thing really added value to my whole life, and hopefully, I now do that as a manager of people. I can give a little bit of that back to young guys coming through as well.
Yeah, and I was going to ask, like, do you think, like, because obviously this translates as well to just regular civilians, people that just work like kind of what they would consider to just kind of be like office jobs, or like myself, I work in construction. Like the way that you climbed up, you said that when you came back the second time when you're 21, you climbed the ranks pretty quickly. Like mentally, what do you think was the difference? Like, what do you think allowed you to kind of climb up that way?
So I think it was a mix of two things. The first one being I was mature enough to deal with what was at hand. The second, in fact, let's say three things. So the second one was the promotion. I got a really quick promotion to Lance Bombardier in the artillery. That's you sort of one run up, and that gave me like a bit of purpose, and it allowed me to manage my own people. Not a lot of people, but I felt really important, and I felt like I owed the people that worked for me. I owed them something, because I was now responsible for people, and that sort of linked into the third one, which is when I was at Lance Bombardier, I met my wife, and we really quickly had our son, my oldest son Mason, who's 13 now. The responsibility, I think, really helped me, and I loved being a dad and a husband. Loved it, and being responsible and being a good parent was so important to me that climbing the ranks meant more money. More money meant I could provide a better lifestyle for everyone back home.
Yeah, and so like when you came back into the military, and again, maybe this isn't something that you've thought of, or maybe you have, but did you have the idea or the intention, like this is going to be my career for life, I'm going to climb the ranks, or were you just kind of coming back to it because you're living with your grandma at the time? She unfortunately passes, like you said. You're like kind of like at a spot where were you kind of like, I don't really know what else to do, or were you kind of deciding like this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, do you know what? I joined. I joined again because I had nothing else. Again, I was bouncing job to job to job. I couldn't hold one down. So short term, I just wanted something steady that could give me some opportunities. Now that it's now the stage that I'm at, long term, you know, it's a full career for me now, and I'll stay in for the 22, 24 years, and potentially even more than that because it's given me so many opportunities and provided such a good lifestyle for my family.
Yeah, it just kind of goes to show like there's so many different management styles. Like I've kind of had the opportunity to be a manager as well for a company that I used to work for. And again, I was kind of probably even too young to be in a management position at a time, even though it was just simply running a gym. But I know like there's so many different people, and there's some people that obviously I'd have, you have to discipline people, and then you have to, like you say, you kind of have like the carrot and the stick. And it just kind of alludes to the idea that like once you got the carrot, you got your first promotion. Like you start a martial art and you might just be like kind of like, oh, I want to do this for a bit, but then you get that first stripe on your belt and you're like, hey, this is something that I can actually improve at, and I'm being appreciated for it. Like that's kind of what made you stick around, it sounds like.
Yeah, you're right. And I almost turned it into my own stick, because I was constantly chomping for the carrot, the gold pot at the end of the rainbow. I was there. I was constant at it. I done my next promotion course only a few weeks after my first one because I was just so ready to sort of progress. And like I said, I flew up the ranks pretty quick. Um, I got the what we used to call the gunnery careers course. That was like if you joined the artillery, that's what you wanted to get on because it's the top 10% of soldiers ever make it onto that. A lot of people don't ever even remain eligible for it. And I'd done that a few years ago. So I'm a sergeant major instructor in gunnery now at the Royal School of Artillery. So I reached as far as I'm concerned, I could leave now, and I'd be pretty happy that I reached up towards the top.
Yeah. And yeah, as well, like I was kind of thinking, like, is there's so many different like kind of positions in the military. Like I know like that I've had, friends of mine that they're young guys, in their 20s, even like in their 30s, and they've been in the military and they've done like yourself, like 3, 4 tours. But then I've known other people as well, like again, I don't know if it's kind of like the timeline of, when they were in the military, but I've had friends' grandparents that were in the Royal Canadian Navy, and they never, left Canadian soil, and they were in the Navy for their entire lives. Like, is that kind of same thing happen over there in the UK?
Um, I think while the height of Afghanistan and Iraq was on, it was rare that somebody didn't at least do a couple of tours out there. Um, Prior to me joining, 10 years before, we had Kosovo and Bosnia, we had Northern Ireland, we had Cyprus, we had Iraq. So there's loads of tours going. So the chances of not going on tour was slim. Now the chances of going on tour are slim, and we're getting people promoted up to sergeants and coming into the mess, with one medal or no medals at all on their chest. They've done 8 years, 10 years. There just wasn't the opportunity to go on tour.
Yeah, like I know actually, like I said, my mom's from the UK. She's from England, and my grandfather actually served for the UK military as well. He did a tour in Africa in like I
Mm.
think the 50s or 60s, way back in the day. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy to think that, there's so many people that, like you said, that they have a career in the military, they have tenure, and they haven't really gone on tours. And I'm not trying to like badmouth them or say that that's
Uh,
dishonorable. I'm just saying like it's crazy to think that there's people that could be in it for like 5 years and they've done 4 tours. And there's some people that, like I said, I know a friend's grandfather. who was like career in the military, and he never left Canadian soil unless he just went down to the States to do certain training.
Yeah, yeah, no, that I think that's going to become more relevant. The way that the military's shaping up now, where it's more small teams going out to places and doing a task and then coming back. And
Like
unless
kind
you're
of
in the
contracted work. Sorry to interrupt you, but is that what you're
yeah,
talking about?
almost contracted. It's more. I don't really know the word for it. It's more, specialist teams are going out to places for a very certain task, and they're staying there just for that task and coming back. Whereas I just don't think there's the appetite to send the army somewhere. I suppose their parachute regiment are out in Afghanistan at the minute, securing the airfield out in Kabul. But apart from that, that's the last of the soldiers out in the Middle East now.
And can I pick your brain about what's going on right now in Afghanistan?
I can answer what I can. Yeah,
I was going to ask you because, like, again, we get different perspectives on our social media and our news, obviously in North America here, and we're just north of the border here in Vancouver. Like, I'm probably about like an hour drive from the border here.
yeah,
We're just north of it, and like, there's so much in terms of like politics of like, they shouldn't have pulled out. They shouldn't have been there in the first place. They shouldn't have pulled out as rapidly as they did. Like, do you have an opinion on that at all?
Um, I don't. It's hard because I don't think it would have mattered what we'd done. It would have been wrong. We can't just stay there forever. You know, but
You
I don't
can't really
know.
just replace their government with yours, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it's so. Yeah, it's Afghanistan specifically is so. It's such an odd place because there are different tribes and there are different religions and there are different ethnic groups and all of these coming together. In the UK and in Canada and America, we love diversity and we want opportunities for everyone. And Afghanistan doesn't want that. It just seems like it wants to go back to how things were before. Um, Maybe not the majority of people, but
Yeah,
now.
there's a difference between the people that live there and the government.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. I don't think it's not a problem that can be solved in 20 years. That it's a generational problem out in the Middle East that is going to take a lot more than my lifetime to sort out. I think.
And again, like kind of more importantly, I think I know I've spoken to some people, and I like I said, like I've spoken to a buddy of mine who grew up in the same city as me. He's done a couple of tours out there as well. And I messaged him the other day. I reached out because I'm like, look, man, like I know that there's so much shit going around social media, but I just want to say like thank you to you because like
Mm.
I think this is honorable. I think, regardless of how, North America's looked at politically now in like kind of the world aspect, I'm proud of that. Like I'm kind of, I'm happy to call you a friend. I'm happy to say that I know you, like, etc. But I know that there's so many people as well that are kind of like, what the fuck did I just do with my life? Like I put my life on the line for what, you know?
Yeah, and I've seen both sides of that coin just in the last week or so. On one hand, you've got the people going, "Why were we even there? Why did my mate lose his legs? Why did this happen? Why did this happen?" And then completely on the other side, I've got other guys going, my bag's packed. I'll go back out there right now if you want me to go sort
Yeah.
something out. Yeah, other people are just they're in it for the paycheck and for the exciting times, and they don't care where they get sent. I suppose being probably in the middle of that's probably the best situation. But there's people, there's both camps, both schools of thought. It's almost like we knew it was going to happen, and if you didn't know that it was going to go like this, then you probably you've had your eyes closed for a long time.
Yeah. Cause I mean, like, it's definitely not the first time that, a country like America has done something similar to that. There's a lot of people that are comparing it to Vietnam. But it's like, man, what kind of advice? Because it seems like, and I could be completely wrong with this, but it seems like you're kind of dealing with the situation pretty well. It sounds like you've got a good support network around you. But for someone that is kind of struggling, because this is kind of more the purpose of why I wanted to have this conversation as well, is like, if someone's out there right now and they're just beside themselves, like they feel completely isolated or alone, and they feel like they've just wasted the last X amount of years of their lives, or like you said, like lost buddies or seen them injured, for someone that feels like that was a waste, like what would you say to that person?
No, I suppose. I mean, it's really hard, and I've got people real close to me struggling with this right now. Um, all I'd probably say is, there's not just their normal support network. There's other people out there. My door's always open to all of my friends, and everyone that's ever been in the military, they've got enough friends all over the country that their doors will always be open for them as well. Suffering in silence is not a good thing. So making other people aware that you are struggling with it rather than just keeping it in. It goes back to my bottle analogy. If that stress is building up, go somewhere, do something, see someone, and let some of that out. Don't just keep bottling it up. It's happened. We've pulled out. It seems to be a bit of a shit show at the minute, but it's happening. There's nothing anybody can do about it apart from deal with the situation. So looking back, it is probably not ideal, but rather sort of looking forward and making sure if you have got any underlying issues, get them started to be dealt with at least.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's parallelism between, again, not the cause of, but kind of the symptom of, where, when people are dealing with depression or anxiety or et cetera, whatever it could be, whatever mental illness, like there's always this weird feeling like we're alone, like we're isolated, like our situation's different than anyone else's and no one else could imagine it. Like, why do you think that, especially because this is something that's at the forefront of a lot of people's conversations, like why is that still a thing?
I think there's just still a stigma surrounding it. I think people there's the pride issue and people don't want to ask for help. I think there's that crazy machoism that's still absolutely inherent in a lot of professions that people just don't feel like they can actually ask for help or they can't go and look for help. The military's crazy for it, but that'll be in any profession or any industry that is dominated heavily by men. I would imagine to be the same. It's almost like it's frowned upon, but I don't think it is frowned upon because places are run by the people that work there. A lot of my friends that work where I am, if somebody asked for help, they would help them. I think the problem is the personal thought of people. People don't want to ask for help or they don't want to say something's wrong because they don't want other people to judge them or look at them as weaker than other people around them when it's not the case. Or I hope it's not the case anyway. It's not the way I would look at somebody, and it's not the way that the people close to me and around me would look at someone either.
Yeah, I was going to say it's so cool that you're kind of having this discussion, because I've been told this, but I feel like you're kind of even more extreme, exaggerated version. Like you're in the military, you're obviously like big into combat sports. I looked at your Instagram page, you've kind of got your own thing going as well around combat sports. I saw you shared something about like bare knuckle boxing today. I'm like,
Yeah,
dude,
yeah,
this guy's legit. And then you're sitting here having a conversation with me for an hour about mental health and like kind of dealing with these issues. Like I feel like it's so cool to have a guy like you know, in this space. Like I feel like you are,
yeah,
when you talk about like, there's so much machoism, and so I call it like kind of cowboy mentality. Like it's like
yeah,
you would be like the epitome of what most people would think of who would be having that mentality,
yeah.
that macho mentality where it's like, you're into fighting. I don't know. Do you fight yourself or?
Yeah, I boxed for years and years, and I'm sort of heavy into mixed martial arts and sort of bare knuckle boxing now. But yeah, I boxed for a number of years, and also sort of trained in MMA, but I've never competed in MMA as well. But yeah, I suppose I think when people look at me, they find out what my profession is. That I've got a shaved head, and that I'm mega into combat sports. Bare knuckle boxing being something I'm heavily into, and probably think like you said, that I'm a real macho man, and yet you know I'm not. I'm just normal. It's just the sports that I like. I'm a sort of quite a placid, easygoing person whose wife tells him what to do when she wants it done, and like this, it always drums back to the, if I'm happy to ask for help, or if I'm willing to, give help to somebody else. I don't know why people get so caught up with not wanting to be macho, because it doesn't help anybody.
Did you ever struggle with that though?
Well, with my own mental health, you mean?
Well, I mean, yeah, like obviously I'm gonna assume that you probably have, and that's why you're so open with it. But I feel like, did you ever struggle with like kind of like that ego part of like, maybe I can deal with this on my own, I don't need to ask for help kind of thing?
Yeah, I think a couple of my early, especially my first tour. I think that was my first tour was unique in the fact that I went to places in really small numbers, and it was ropey. Ropey is a term we use in the UK for if something was dicey or dangerous. We say ropey.
Dodgy,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, so I had some real ropey times, firefights, and a lot of different stuff happened. And to be honest, I probably didn't deal with it properly. I probably didn't deal with it well. Um, Not that I wouldn't say I've struggled myself with mental health. What I struggled with was how to separate it and put it behind me, not forget about it, but to empty that bottle out. So I use that all the time because it's the easy way for my brain to work it out. Is that stress bottle's filling up? I need to have a little blowout, or go and do whatever. I need to go away on holiday. I need to have a weekend off. I need to
Go
go and do
punch
something.
someone in the face, man.
Yeah. Back when I was younger and a little bit less heavy. Yeah.
I love that, man. Yeah, because I feel like that, and your analogy with the bottle, I love that. I think I might start adopting that as well, because
Yeah.
I used to use like a kettle. Like that was my analogy. Like it's like a
Yeah.
kettle boiling over that has too much water. Like the pressure's got to go
Yeah.
somewhere, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard. I think I'm happy to speak to anybody about mental health. I'm not. I hate, and this is someone real close to me who did struggle with PTSD. His version of me, so his sergeant major said to him, bullshit. Get on with it. Stop acting like a bitch. And yeah, I'd hate someone to feel like that. I wouldn't help them, because I'd make every allowance to help them, whether that be just to have a cup of tea and to chat, or whether that be to signpost them to someone with a much better understanding and experience dealing with mental health. Then I would do that. Whether it be time off, whether it be anything at all, I'd always be there to help people out.
Can you tell, like, can you like kind of see the difference in people? Like, can you tell when there's something up or
It's hard because people will deal with all different types of stress, and I think that's the main problem with picking up someone with PTSD. They say, oh, they might be drinking more heavily, or they might be more argumentative, or they might be doing this, but actually they might be doing all of those other things because they're arguing with their wife at home, or one of their parents has passed away, or they've argued with their brother, or they've been passed over for promotion at work, and it's the same symptoms regardless of what the stress is.
yeah, and but it's like either way you have to deal with that, right? Because you can't have like, especially, you know, like I said, I've managed gyms, I work in construction sites now, and it's like when you have someone that's, not with the healthiest coping mechanisms, like they well, not almost, they become a liability at work. Like it's like
Yeah,
they're gonna either cost you money or put someone at risk. And it's like, I could only imagine in the military, that's even more, like you said, exasperated, like that's amplified, right?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, I mean, you know, some of the more extreme ways of dealing with it, like drinking really heavily. You know, I've had a friend of mine drink himself to death. You know, in while he was still in the military. I've had another one, you know, who only was alive for another 6 months after leaving the military for drinking himself to death. Um, but that's easy to pick up. The little micro symptoms are not as easy to pick up, but they're all going to lead to the same place, which is, you know, someone boiling over, and someone, you know, potentially doing something that, you know, nobody wants them to do.
Now, because especially like, this, you always hear like the phrase, you can take a horse to water type of thing. Like there's no, like in your opinion, do you think that there's a way you can kind of, coerce someone to, like, once you start to see the signs, you're like, okay, this guy's, boozing every single night and he's yelling at people that he wouldn't have yelled at before, like the telltale signs that someone's dealing with shit, right? Like, do you think that there's a way that you can kind of not force them into it, but kind of coerce them into it? Or is it kind of like the, you can bring the horse to water but can't make them drink thing?
I do. I think sometimes people don't realise the amount of help that's available, or the stress was exacerbated by the fact that they didn't want to tell anyone, and it's almost like it's a release once somebody finds out. And I think that, you know, they say, don't they? You know, a problem halved is a problem shared is a problem halved. You know, and I think that somebody else knowing that you're struggling, somebody else knowing that you're going through a hard time, could be just that little step off the gas that they need, or somebody else telling them to go and get help is more sort of meaningful in their mind than them going themselves, because then they've got their, oh, I've been told to come here, and then they may get, you know, that stress off them if they go to the medical center, the doctor, you know, whatever. Um, but they wanted that excuse, that somebody else telling them to do it, to make it okay.
Yeah, it's like, man, I've seen it so many times as well. Like again, I can't tell you how it is over where you are, but I know in Vancouver, like we're getting plagued here by fentanyl, like substance abuse. And there's been a lot of my friends that have been impacted by this. And like I said, like, I've seen bodies drop, but I've also seen the type of people where they can kind of clean up their lives altogether. They don't touch liquor anymore. And, they're climbing the ladder at work, like their lives are improving so much. And, I've had these types of conversations with them as well, where it's like, we've got buddies where you kind of talk to them and you're like, man, like something's fucked in your life, man. Like you've got to fucking pick it up. And they'll kind of respond back in anger or defensiveness. But then there's certain people where you bring it up and they're like, yeah, bro, I fucking know. Like,
Yeah,
thanks for asking. And then that's kind of the stepping stone. Like, is that the same in the military with this kind of stuff?
yeah, I think so. When I first joined, it was, you know, there was a huge drinking culture, and there still is a big drinking culture in the military. You know, I don't think that's ever going to go anywhere. But you see with some people, they start to then creep that in to Thursday nights, and then sneak it into lunch times, and sneak it in right the way forward till Monday morning. And then it starts becoming an issue when they're not fit to drive the next day, or they're not fit to, fit to go and do the fitness test the next day or whatever. But there's still that whole, crew of people that ran their fastest fitness test the morning after being out drinking all night, and it's real macho and it's funny, and everyone laughs when they hear the story about, guy coming in with his trousers on backwards, and because the drinking culture was there, it was way more, first off, acceptable, but second off, hard to tell if someone was using it as a coping mechanism, because like I said, everybody was drinking all the time from Thursday through to Sunday. Everyone was drinking.
And like you've kind of climbed the ladder, obviously. And so, like at entry level, you've seen this stuff. So, like, kind of once you're at the top and you see the people that are entry level doing it, like, it's like, oh, yeah, I remember back in those days, right? Like, it's like kind of like even the superiors are kind of like, well, yeah, that's just what we did.
Yeah, I think to an extent, yeah. Yeah, it's hard now because like when sometimes I do duties, and part of your duty is to walk around and make sure that the mess has been closed at a certain time, or there's no block parties happening in the junior ranks accommodation and stuff. uh, Part of you just wants to let them crack on, and just blow out, because no one ever came into our accommodation and stopped us drinking, and we were all fine. um, but I guess we now know the problems that can happen later on, and maybe they don't. But yeah, it's a hard, that fork in the road of going in and stopping them or letting them crack on is kind of becomes like a moral issue. And do you actually go and stop them, or do you just be by the book and go in and put a stop to it because that's what the orders say?
Yeah. And it's also like I was gonna say, like I'm kind of all over the place right now as well, but I was gonna say like there almost is that fine line as well with mental health, where it's like kind of like, you know, we don't want to put everything on halt for every little single problem, but as well, we always know that it's the little single problems that build up for certain people. Like it's not always one big event where it's like kind of and like there's a fine line between like kind of like stifling all of your problems and your emotions, and it's kind of also like oversharing and kind of amplifying your problems as well. Like, do you kind of know what I'm saying? Am I explaining this well?
Yeah, kind of again, it's all
Like
these
there kind of
problems.
always is there is kind of those times where it is appropriate to quote unquote man up. Like it's like we're in the middle of something, like this isn't really the appropriate time to deal with this maybe.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the hard thing with the military specifically, and it goes right back to our first bit of our conversation when we said, the job of the army is to close with and kill the enemy. Now, there isn't time then to put things on hold to make sure everyone's feeling okay. There isn't time when you're on a patrol in Afghanistan, Iraq, in wherever, whatever country you're in, you're on a patrol, and there's a chance of bullets start flying. That's not the time to speak about some issues. The line is, when is the time? Do we almost do a mini sort of post-op check every single time you come back in? Do you not take somebody out because they're feeling down that day and operate a man down, and then increase the risk for everyone else? It's hard to manage. It's almost impossible to manage, and I don't think anyone's ever going to have the right answer, because let's say your task is to go out, a section go out, which is 8 people, and do a patrol around a compound. If someone's not feeling it that day because they're feeling depressed, well, what's it's like scales, isn't it? Do you operate with 7 people and not have enough people, or do you risk taking out this person that is not going to be on their A game because they're struggling with something else? And I suppose that's the difference between management and leadership. Knowing the difference, because you're not just managing people, you've got to lead those other people out as well.
So that I guess you kind of answered my question. I was going to say, like, how do you deal with that? Because, like, you personally, you're in that leadership role. Like, how do you kind of deal with that? Because sometimes there is that telltale sign of, this guy's not operating at, he's not firing on all pistons. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I've had situations where I can see something's up, and I've sent people home, at 10 o'clock in the morning, because I just know there's something wrong, and it tends to be, I'll just say, is something up? They'll say yes or no, and then if they say yes and are happy to give me the information, I'll try and deal with it. If they say no, but I can still tell there's something wrong, I'll make every allowance to just send them home, or you know at least cut the workload down a little bit. But that's individual management and leadership, and it's not the sort of nobody teaches you. They try and teach you how to be a good manager or how to be a good leader, but no one can teach you empathy, um, and how to read someone. Sometimes you just know, and you can't explain why you know. You just know that someone's not right, and the longer you spend with someone, the more you get to know them. And also, other people who are dealing with that exact same issue, they won't want to be sent home. They won't want to get sent home at 10 o'clock because the stress is at home. So they'd rather be at work.
Yeah. Or like the other thing is like people sometimes deal with things differently. Like, I've had this conversation with my girlfriend where it's like, sometimes when I'm stressed or when I'm pissed off, like, certain people want to talk about their problems, but I'm the type of person where it's like, I just want to do work. Like, I just want to kind of, that's how I kind of feel like you said earlier about your time in the military, like, that's how I add value. That's what makes me feel more confident, makes me feel better about myself. It adds to, like, when I can go out and do work. Like, I'm sure there's tons of guys like that in the military where they're like, no, I'm stressed out, so I want to work.
Yeah, I want to do some menial tasks where I don't have to think, and I just go and do something and achieve something by the end of the day.
Yeah. And I can, yeah, like you said, like I can look back at my day and like I didn't just sit at home and quote unquote rest all day. Like I went out and did something that added value. Like that's kind of, and I think as men, a lot of the times, like that is kind of how we process our emotions. That's why we work out. That's why, we do some of the things that we do as men. Like, that's kind of how I process my thoughts, is while I'm doing things. Like while my hands are busy, my mind can rest.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. The there's loads of opportunities where I work to be able to do that as well. And then it's almost, the rewards are twofold. The first one being, you've just occupied your time and your thoughts for the day. But secondly, you've achieved something by the end of the day, and it gives you something to look back on and go, oh, actually, maybe I'm not that stressed. Look what I've just achieved.
Yeah. Or just like, because again, like there's, jobs in construction where sometimes you're, slowly, like your pace is a lot slower and you're more focused on certain things. And then there's other times where you're just having to do manual labor, like you were saying. And I find like the days that I'm just doing manual labor, it's like literally that's my time where I think the best sometimes. Like I have these crazy ideas where it's like, hey, I never thought of this thing from that perspective before. Like it's just like almost like maybe washing your truck or washing your car or like mowing your lawn kind of thing, like the menial tasks, like you're saying, like that's sometimes when I process my thoughts the best.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had exactly the same situation. I've had great ideas come to me when I'm out cutting the grass. I've had great ideas when I'm putting sand between the gaps of the patio stones. Just weird little jobs that need doing, and they're real time consuming. So your mind's allowed to wander a little bit, but you're still concentrating on the task at hand. So it probably lets your brain process things in a way that it doesn't normally do. I don't do well just sat there. I can't put a time aside to just come up with plans. That doesn't work for me. I tend to go and do something else, and a plan will come to me.
Is there opportunity for jobs like that in the military where you're like kind of maybe on tour and you're like, dude, this guy's dealing with some shit, but I know if I leave him alone, like something dangerous could happen. Like we can kind of give him this task to go and do so he can just fucking just sort shit out in his head for a bit.
Yeah, there's always like digging needs doing. It used to be filling sandbags. That was when I first joined. You could go and fill sandbags, and that was the menial task. And there was always more sandbags needed filling because they'd always get sort of fragged up and lose all their sand. So it'd be like, yeah, replace the sandbags.
Like Chris is off today. Go and fill some fucking sandbags, buddy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, or the burn pit. The burn pit would be another one. Just collect all the rubbish and go and burn it.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's such a funny thing. Yeah, I heard in Sweden that's how they deal with just their garbage. They just burn it and use it for energy.
Probably, yeah. They're pretty swept up over in all the Nordic countries. To be fair.
That's sick, man. Well, dude, I picked your brain a lot. I can't really think of much else to ask you, but again, like I wanted to, before I let you go, I want to say thank you so much for everything you've done in your career, keeping us safe. Because like I said, like obviously you're half a world away from me right now, but they are allied forces and through NATO indirectly. And you have worked with the Canadian military as well. So I want to say thank you as well, because you've kind of let me live the privileged life that I have, but also thank you for your time. But before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, like, kind of, like I said, if there are people out there that, maybe they're in the military or maybe they're not, maybe they're just civilians like me, and they're kind of suffering alone or they feel like kind of isolated, like what would you kind of say to that person, like in terms of, what their mentality could be like or how they could shift that?
So I suppose what I would say would be, first off, understand that anybody can suffer. Anybody can suffer with any type of mental health, whether it be depression, whether it be anxiety, whether it be PTSD. The list goes on. Anybody can suffer with it. It doesn't matter how macho you are, manly you are, what job you do, how big you are. Anybody can suffer. If you've got a support network, use it. And my main thing that I would say and suggest, and I tell everybody this: nobody's out to get you, and no one will think worse of you if you let them know that you've got a problem. And I just hope that before anybody does anything silly, goes for a walk that they're planning on not coming back from, getting in their car for their final ever drive, there's always somebody that you could reach out to, and please reach out to those people before you do something where people may miss you.
Awesome, man. Like I said, thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that you're willing to come back as well, because I really enjoyed this. And I'm sure that you and I could talk for hours on end, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on.
Tell me I didn't just lose you. Well, I think I just lost Chris. So if you're still listening at this point, thank you so much for listening to this. I'll link his Instagram and everything else. You can go and check out his page in the show notes if you're listening to the podcast version of this. If you're listening to, if you're listening to the YouTube version, you'll see it in the description below. But I'm gonna reconnect with him right now and just thank him one more time. But if you know anybody that needs to hear this type of message, please do share this with them, because I know there's a lot of valuable information that Chris and I got to talk about today. So like I said, if you know anybody that needs to hear this message, or if you found a new perspective through it, or you found an uplifting message through it, then please do share this show with someone as well. Other than that, thank you so much. I love you. If you listen to this, you are the reason I do what I do. Much love and peace out.